Hi everyone, it's Refresh, and on April 27th I went to Friday Night Magic for a draft and got to play Dominaria for the very first time. This is what I drafted that day. As you can see, I drafted a lot of red. In pick one was Siege Gang Commander, who I instantly noticed was a very powerful card with the ability to create 3 red goblin tokens and to be able to sacrifice any goblin to do 2 damage to any target. So I went down the red path pretty quickly, getting additional goblins and wizards and tons of red removal. So I was pretty happy with that. The second color was not as obvious. Part of that was because I got some decent green cards early on, and I also got some decent blue cards early on, and then I got touch of a Benthic Druid, so I thought I was going in that direction. I also picked up a Shalai Voice of Plenty while I was picking up the green cards in pack 2, but green dried up pretty fast, white dried up pretty fast, and so it was really just red and blue that was coming my way. I somehow did manage to draft a small wizard and goblin sub-theme, so that was kind of interesting. It wasn't really a major theme, but I was pretty pleased with what I drafted. So this is the deck that I eventually built. As you can see, I am virtually mono red with a splash of blue, and it is sort of, not intentionally, but kind of a goblin wizard double tribal deck with a lot of removal, and I think it looks pretty good. I mean, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of removal. You have the Jousting Lance to get my aggro guys in there, Frenzy Rage to get more aggro guys in there, Blink of an Eye as a piece of tempo that can later draw me a card as well. I have Gitu Chronicler to get back any of my pieces of removal, and the Bloodstone Goblins are mostly 2-drops to get in there. Once in a while I'll be able to kick a card like the Gitu Chronicler, the Kelvin Overseers, or Skizzik in order for them to get that little power, toughness, and menace boost. And then I have a handful of wizards in the Chronicler, Adeliz, and the Journey Mages to get in some extra wizard bonuses, whether I am prowessing off of Adeliz or the extra bonus damage from Gitu Journey Mage or the cost discount from the Academy Journey Mage. And other than that, it's just be aggressive. Very, very aggressive. In game 1, I played against a mono white deck, and that was pretty surprising. We were pretty evenly matched throughout most of the game. My opponent playing a bit of a historic flyers theme, whereas I was all on the ground, and I actually managed to play a Goblin War Chief and actually play goblins off of my Goblin War Chief hasty. And so when my opponent flooded just a little bit at the end of the game, I managed to play a Siege Gang Commander. Everybody came in hasty, and I could just throw my goblins at that point at my opponent for the win, and so he conceded. In game 2, my opponent got down Traxos and a Voltaic Servant, and I kind of just died to the Traxos. There wasn't really a whole lot I could do other than just take the hits, and I wasn't able to mount much of a defense, whereas my opponent kept playing cards to fill the board, and I eventually lost as a result of that. In game 3, my opponent got stuck on lands and wasn't able to play much for most of the game, whereas I got to play several of my creatures and bounce my opponent's stuff and burn out my opponent's stuff and turn my guys sideways, and I was doing a lot of damage. And so I won that one fairly handily because of my opponent's mana screw. After that, I was 1-0. Match 2 was a mirror match against another red-blue tempo wizards aggro deck. My opponent took a mulligan to 6, and I was just able to play more removal and more creatures, whereas my opponent wasn't, and he also only had 4 mana at any time, and so he was a little bit constrained on what he could cast, and so I got him there for the win. In the second game, I took a mulligan to 6, and on a risky keep with just blue lands in hand, and I never drew a third land. After several turns, I think it was 9 turns or so, I didn't draw a third land at all, not even 1 red land, which could have helped me to stabilize, but I just took beats, was not able to play anything at all, and I actually had to discard the hand size several times, and so I just lost that one straight out to Mana Screw. In the very third game, I had a slight advantage at first, and I played basically Goblin Tribal, getting a Bloodstone Goblin on turn 2, a Goblin War Chief on turn 3, and then a Siege Gang Commander on turn 4, and I also managed to remove my opponent's Valduck, which was actually quite important because he had Jaya's Immolating Inferno in his hand and could have wiped my entire board. But because I removed his legendary, he wasn't able to cast it, and I just kind of got in there for the win because I had so much value on the cards that I was able to play. And after that, I was 2-1 in games, and I went on to the final round, undefeated. Match 3 was up against a Golgari deck, and for the very first game, I was just much more aggressive than my opponent. I played a few cards and got in with heavy damage with Jousting Lance, and eventually my opponent was at such a low life total that he was forced to shove his creatures. His Song of Freyalise never really managed to go off, and so I came in for the win. I mean, my opponent did have to take a mulligan to 6, so that was part of the reason why my opponent was a little bit on the back foot. But my aggression was hard for my opponent to deal with, especially once I had multiple creatures and he was down to very few of them. In our second game, I was the one that ended up taking a mulligan to 6, and I was on the back foot for pretty much the entire game. I was able to stabilize a little bit thanks to playing a few creatures, but my opponent eventually played a Thorn Elemental, and I was not at a very good life total, and so he was able to get through for the win. In the final game, my opponent kept a 2-lander and played a Llanowar Elf, which I promptly burned out with Sheevan Fire. And from there, my opponent could not draw another land, whereas I played lands, I played creatures, and I had a dominating board presence and got in for the win. And so I finished the Friday Night Magic 3-0, and that got me some store credit as well as a promo of my choice. There were 3 choices this time around, so you're actually getting choices of promos, one of which is a black kill spell, the other is Shauna Sisei's Legacy, and the final choice was Opt, and this was quite pretty. I think it was the best looking of the bunch, and so I opted to take this one instead. And I came out with a few winnings, nothing in terms of money in the cards, but I was pretty pleased with my performance, I was pleased with the deck, I was pleased with the draft, and I really enjoyed playing this set. So I would be happy to do it again, and I would, in fact, go the very next day to draft weekend for another draft. Did you guys play Friday Night Magic draft? Let me know how your drafts went in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching. This was Refresh, and I will see you next time.